From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast.
The fastest growing entertainment phenomenon of this generation.
I, Prophet of Esports, joined today by my friend and co-host William Collis.
Yeah, we got the book of esports out. It's a big deal.
So everyone knows me as the Prophet and William as the Professor.
The Business of Esports podcast is sponsored by Esports Entertainment Group, a leading esports and online gambling company. For more information, go check them out at esportsentertainmentgroup.com. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Doalibi. I'm joined today by my friends and co-hosts, William Collis and Jimmy Barada. For those of you who are new to the podcast, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love, all the 5-star ratings and reviews. Thank you for telling your friends and family about the podcast. We really appreciate it. This is how we've grown. And if you haven't already, just a reminder right off the top of the show here, go buy William's book, The Book of Esports. Go do it. I don't know why you're waiting. And if you've bought it and you've read it and you love it, go leave that review on Amazon. Show William some love. Tell him how much you enjoyed the book and how great the foreword was, most importantly.
We don't know who wrote the foreword, but it's great.
It's great. How you guys doing, William, Jimmy?
I'm doing great. Jimmy, how are you doing?
Having a wonderful day. Thank you for asking.
Jimmy, is this your first time joining us for the podcast?
Second time, actually. Second time.
He was there at the time I wasn't there.
Correct.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So, so second. And then third, if you count when you guys interviewed me, which was a lot of fun, and everyone should go listen to that episode.
That's number one.
When he's on, do you have to do featuring Thick Boy in the title? Just a question.
Thank you, Chris. That does seem necessary and relevant.
Yeah.
For those who are just listening to the podcast and maybe haven't come to the live stream, which by the way you should, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time every Wednesday evening. Jimmy, he needs a nickname. So I guess let me put it to all of you. Jimmy needs a nickname because I refuse to accept Thick Boy as his nickname.
We're all allowed to submit our nicknames for the podcast, and everybody usually goes with something but Jimmy was just straight on. He's like, "This is me." And it's nuts. Everybody loves it. Everybody loves it for Jimmy.
Now, William,
let Jimmy. Almost. That's it.
Yeah. William, this is an exciting episode for you, I know. Because your Heroes of the Storm dreams may come true tonight.
This is a big deal because we have some guests on the podcast today who could be considering me for my, late blooming pro career. Why are you laughing? I mean, why is anyone laughing?
This is serious. You had your own esports. You have your own esports team, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Couldn't sign yourself.
No, obviously conflicted out of that.
Right? Conflicted out of that. Mm-hmm. So this to me is your best shot at this point.
And this is going to be, I think, real insight for the listeners to see how a talent pitch goes down, because I have an extremely compelling narrative.
I can't wait to hear it, William. I can't wait to hear it. But before we hear it, I just want to introduce our guests. Again, every week seems to get better than the last. We've got two of the most amazing guests on today. We have Chris Lloyd, who's the Chief Strategy Officer at Evolve Talent Agency, and Duncan Stanley, who's the Account Director at Evolve Talent Agency. Welcome, guys, to the podcast.
Good to be here. Yep, thank you.
Guys, for our listeners, I'm sure many of our listeners know about Evolved. I'm sure many know about you guys, but for those who don't, would love if you could give them your background, how you got into gaming, what you're doing at Evolved, what Evolved does. Basically, the Chris and Duncan story and the Evolve story would be great.
Go for it.
Sure, I'll go first. I'm Duncan Stanley. This is my 21st year in the gaming industry. My first job was I was literally working in the mailroom at a game publisher called Gathering of Developers, which changed its name to God Games. It was owned by Take-Two, and then many years later is now kind of in like its third incarnation as Devolver Digital. So worked with all those guys literally 20 years ago, and then bounced around, worked at Microsoft, Electronic Arts, Nexon, kind of in community marketing, biz dev, PR side of publishing stuff. And then, the last few years I've been doing kind of biz dev in like the apparel merchandise space, a lot of stuff for esports and live events, with a lot of big, it's the big players in this space making, physical merch for that. My claim to fame though is
Throws great
6 years
parties.
ago now. I was at E3, walking around in between the Microsoft and the PlayStation booth, and a Getty photographer just took a photo straight down the aisle, showing, PlayStation versus Xbox. And I am dead center right in the middle looking at my phone. So that article, that photo is used every time E3 is mentioned. So I'm probably the single most known and important person in all of gaming, I would say, is how I think of myself.
So Duncan, just to be clear, you work at Evolve for fun, right? Because the royalties on this photo must be massive.
Yeah. That little piece of paper you sign away your photo rights at E3, I can probably get that revoked.
little waiver on the back of the ticket.
Saying you don't. Yeah, but and it's Getty, right? They don't have any money, so
yeah, none whatsoever.
Yeah. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I'm Chris Lloyd. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here, like Paul said, at Evolve Talent. I've been with Evolve for, I think, a little over 3 years now at this point, but I've been in the gaming industry since I think about 2003. I look young, but rest assured, I'm not. Blessing and a curse. I guess William and I are actually kind of on this podcast for the same reason. He's got the late blooming esports career, and I was in esports. I went into gaming because I was late blooming in my real life, and so I always played sports growing up. Soccer, basketball, football. I consider myself an excellent 3-and-D basketball player, but I didn't grow very quickly in high school. I actually didn't hit my growth spurt until my junior year, and I started playing. We called it professional video games back in the day, but admittedly, it's probably just competitive games. Back in my sophomore year, quit playing traditional sports. I just couldn't compete. It was fun going out for passes on the football team, but you catch everything, but you get hit, 2 times and you're knocked, and that's tough as 5 foot, 100 pounds. And so I went into esports, started competing, spent a whole summer, playing 16 hours a day. And that led to, that was in a game called Soldier of Fortune 2, basically dedicated my whole life to that game back in the day. And then played in a couple of the invite leagues, and then transitioned over to Call of Duty 1 and then to Call of Duty 2. And, that was all on PC back in the day, before Call of Duty went into, a console focused esports scene. And so, we had a bunch of different teams back in the day. I played on the same team effectively for like 7 years. We still game together today. We're all buddies. We go to each other's weddings and so forth. And, that's the type of experience that, helped facilitate me becoming an excellent agent in the esports field, which didn't just come naturally after playing as a pro player. Back in those days, there was no money in it. I think I made $3,500 over, a 4 or 5 year career, had a couple, good vacations, but outside of that, the hourly wage certainly wasn't there. So I played through college at UC Santa Barbara, went to the World Series of Video Games in 2007, was fortunate enough to win a LAN a few years before that, Newegg 2K4, got a taste of championship. And then, after college, I went to law school. I was unfortunately quite good at law. I did really well in law school, moot court, law review, a bunch of different honors programs, FAT scholarship. I thought, life as a litigator would be, fulfilling and excellent. So after law school, I went and worked at an employment plaintiffs firm where I was representing, wronged employees as well as people who had personal injuries. Did that, but the money wasn't good enough. So I chased the bag, went to corporate defense, did that for a little over a year, hated my life. It was terrible. Jimmy knows, he's an attorney, and, the 2,000 billable hours a year is extremely rough, and it really weighs on your mental. So I I left there, took, a couple months to myself. Overwatch was coming out. I built a new gaming PC with a nice severance package that I had negotiated for myself at the corporate defense firm, and then it was off to the races. There was a brief moment where I thought I could be a professional Overwatch player. I think I was 27 or 28 years old at that point, and I certainly wasn't putting in the hours of the time, and ultimately, like, that was, a pipe dream. But I started helping players in Overwatch as their attorney. Got a lot of people paid when they weren't being previously paid, and this was back in the day when you were already hearing more eyeballs in the World Series, more eyeballs than the NBA Finals, and the players were making $500 a month despite being on teams that had literally sold naming rights to a sponsor. So knowing what the economics of that look like now, like, it was far more than $500 a month per player. But with that said, when Overwatch League rolled around, we realized that I needed to start pitching my guys. There was a lot of traditional sports entities that came in and bought franchise spots, and they weren't necessarily the same people that we had been dealing with for years. So we had to go out, find out who they were, develop pitches, help them build their rosters. And at that point, we realized that we were full-blown agents, and that was when I joined up with Evolved, and it's been off to the races since then. So came in as the director of esports. Basically, I'm at esports agent on Twitter. That was honestly, like, my quote unquote claim to fame. I've always been the guy behind the scenes, and not necessarily looking for notoriety for myself, unlike Duncan, who is the Getty superstar, the spokesperson and figurehead for E3. I never want that for myself, but ultimately here we are. So little history on Evolved. We started as an esports focused agency. We were the first licensed agency in the space, working with a lot of different pro players at the time. Those pro players, of course, included XQC before pre-Overwatch League. And as he got bigger and a lot of our other guys started developing themselves as streamers and content creators, we had to develop the agency as well. And so with that, we developed the sponsorship capabilities, built the brand partnerships department, and now we're not a little esports agency. Now we are a very robust creator gaming central agency. And I'd like to consider ourselves some of the utmost experts on this stuff in the world. So we brought in Duncan. He's greatly assisting our corporate representation, our consulting efforts. He's an expert in a lot of different fields, like he had mentioned in his introduction. And now we're working with a couple really amazing corporate clients, and still trying to save the world on the esports front, while also helping some of these streamers build lifelong careers through endorsement deals and sponsorships, and platform deals with Twitch or YouTube or Facebook, whatever it may be. That's about it.
It's an awesome story, Chris. Before we dive into a lot of the business questions here, I want to ask the most important question, which is,
of course,
how unfortunate is it that Call of Duty, from a competitive standpoint, has gone from PC to console? Just how unfortunate is that?
Well, for me personally, it's really unfortunate. My whole team that I played with, I jumped around from teams, and when I settled down, it was because I realized that one of my best friends from 7th grade that went to my high school was also at the pro level in Call of Duty 1. And when we started playing together, we literally were on the same basketball team in 7th grade. I went to the same middle school and high school, and one day we were just talking. Crazy. Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, I play on a clan in Call of Duty 1." And then we built a team called Nephilim. We still game together. We got a 300-person Discord or something absurd with all the old geezers from back in the day. We'll do pickup games. They run leagues and stuff. It's fun. But the switch from it's unfortunate for me, right? But the reality is that it was fortunate for the world of esports. The fact that it went from PC to console, greatly tracks the development we're seeing now of, PC console going to mobile. It made it far more accessible. A lot more people had consoles than had PCs at the time.
Whoa. We got to go, because this is Chris. This is, you couldn't have brought up a more interesting topic of conversation, because there's a real tension on the podcast that we have. I almost think you should move my square over to the right and swap me with Jimmy for this, because for those who can't see, we have a 5-way podcast, and I'm scared of Paul. But Paul, thank you. I'm safe virtual.
Do you feel safer
from Paul? Yeah, but Paul is Paul. This might be Paul. Tell me if I'm unfairly characterizing your position, but I think you have viewed the evolution of esports towards console, and then, by extension towards mobile, as inherently handicapping or de-skilling the space, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's fascinating because the counterpoint we've always had is, but it's accessibility, more people. So Chris,
Yeah.
like, can you say more and expand about that? Because this is a hot topic for us on the cast.
Yeah, well, I'd hate to, synthesize both of your point of views, but the reality is, Paul's right and the accessibility argument's also right. Like it definitely, there is less of a skill gap on mobile because of the limitations with the controls and so forth. But the reality is that in every other country in the world besides the US, mobile games are taking off around the world. Everybody has a smartphone in their pocket, but in other countries they don't have consoles, they don't have PCs, predominantly, and they'll play all of their games on mobile. I was in the Middle East over the holidays last year, and everybody's playing PUBG on their phone. But here, PUBG's a quote unquote dead title. It's had a resurgence lately, but everybody was playing it there. And I think that's the accessibility issue that you want to succeed, right? Like there are millions and millions and millions of people in the Middle East are influencers that are super massive with tons of millions of followers, and they're not Twitch influencers, and they're not PC gaming influencers. And so there's a whole world there of untapped opportunity, even in Asia, Middle East, Africa, so forth.
Do you believe, and I don't want to stay too long because I want to go back to the talent agency stuff, but like just theoretically, do you believe in sort of this thesis? Because in that thesis we float that like mobile is the gateway, that the accessibility is important, but naturally you migrate up ecosystem, right? So you fall in love. Like, is that, do you think that's the case, or is it really just mobile is its own thing and there can be a world where there are mobile esports and it's totally fine?
Well, we'll see, right? Like I don't have any anecdotal experiences with that, but what we did see with console, now the Call of Duty League is run on PC, and so all those guys are playing on their PCs with their gaming controllers from their console days. And that was the natural progression. My nephews had a consoles their whole lives. Then they came to me one day and they wanted gaming PCs, and so we got them there. I don't know if the same trajectory will be true of mobile, and maybe mobile is always its own standalone scene, standalone platform. But certainly the opportunity is there. And once you're a gamer, you're always looking for the best platform to play on. And that's pretty much always going to be PC until the consoles really step it up.
I on that note, I think that the kind of games that the kind of game itself, because PUBG mobile esports might not be big in the US, but the Twitch based fast Twitch games that low reaction times really matter. Extreme accuracy really matters. Those games tend to live on PC, whereas Clash of Clans has 100 times the the players of the largest esport. Is great on mobile. Everyone plays it or played it, and it's it's because that game is built for that platform. And I don't think it's de-skilling. When you make the same game for all of those platforms, yes, the best player on PC is probably going to be better at playing on PC than the other guys, but he probably will lose badly to someone on a mobile phone.
That's interesting because there's a cross compatibility trend right now, right?
Yeah.
Which is like a big trend, which I think is
It's
about
almost a
making it
necessity.
accessible,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like,
That's why I
are
don't
you?
get Paul's, sorry, William. That's why I don't get Paul's argument, because as an also a PC gamer, I love mobile gamers because it's just easy. It just boosts my KD, right? Like this is just cannon
farming,
fodder, right? It's just
farming mobile gamers in Fortnite. Or
I look
what,
for the
Jimmy?
guy staring up with the gun. And I
Jimmy,
go
here's
for him.
why, because I farm the guys on PC too, all right? So
Yeah.
You guys are just
Your
lucky to
hobbies.
play games with mobile versions. That's all
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
You're lucky to have that.
No, I compare mobile esports because again, I'm a big fan, and I repeat myself 1,000 times on the podcast, right? I'm a huge fan of mobile gaming. It's good for the industry, huge dollars. I'm sure you guys, from a talent agency standpoint, love it, right? Because there's huge dollars flowing in to these mobile games, and it's good for your talent, like especially the creators, not necessarily the esports competitors, but I see all of these sponsored streams by Clash of Clans and whatever else all the time. It's just, I don't think they have much of a future as a spectator sport, for the same reason why no one goes to watch T-ball, right? Unless it's your kid playing. You go watch baseball if you feel like something like that. And so, yeah, I get why it exists, and I'm all for it from an industry standpoint. I think 20 years from now, no one's going to be talking about going to a stadium to watch kids play on their mobile phones. I just don't think that's going to be a thing. I may be wrong. It's unlikely.
No,
but...
like it's a really interesting point, because it feels ridiculous thinking about watching people on their phones on a stage. But at the 2007 World Series of video games, they had a Guitar Hero esports competition, and one of the categories that they were judged on was literally style. And so you had people up there like doing the guitar swings around their necks. They were also incredible at Guitar Hero, and then they also had a boxing ring set up where they had, I think, 2 monitors, and people, I forget the boxing game that was out then, but they had 2 guys standing in the ring with their shoes off, dirty socks on. Rest assured, this is the World Series of video games. And
no question, Chris. But like, these things have novelty value, I think, right now.
Yeah,
I think,
a little bit.
I think part of my thesis is just like, come back to me in 10 or 20 years once I think a little bit of the novelty of it all has worn off. But I don't know. Can I just want to get you guys back on the talent side of things, if possible here? Because I'd like to ask a big question, which is, what are some of the big changes you guys have seen from a gaming and esports talent standpoint over the last, like, both of you have been in the industry for longer than I think maybe just about anyone else we've had on the podcast. What are the big changes you've seen from a talent perspective? Is it dollars? Is that like whatever, anything good or bad that you've seen over the years?
So Chris has way more experience with talent than me, so I'll give him the floor. But coming from inside where I was at game publishers, and we were hiring talent and influencers, and everybody, a few years ago, everyone was seeing like, can we make our game an esport? And a lot of people didn't know how to do that, but they're like, oh, can we do it? It's big right now. Can we make Homefront the Revolution an esport? No, but I was tasked to do so. So it's
Duncan, can I ask? Sorry, can I interrupt you here? Yeah. Why did they want you to do that?
Yeah, actually, that's a great. Tell us the story inside. Like, what's the business?
What was the business case there?
Esports are big right now. It wasn't like a hardcore like you got to do it. It was okay. Let's look across our entire portfolio of games. Can we make an esport out of this? And it goes, well, is this game multiplayer? Yes. Is it competitive? Yes. Okay. All right. Boxes are checked now. What would it look like to turn this into an esport? And you're like, well, publisher, there's a lot. That doesn't mean that game's going to become an esport. I mean, but the potential's there. So it's like, what would it take to turn it into one? It's like, just like Overwatch, right? Like, it's a multiplayer game, right? Same thing. Multiplayer guys shooting each other.
I ask because I think everyone coming into esports from a game standpoint has maybe one or 2 or 3 goals, right? It's either like we see this as a marketing expense because we want to sell more of our game, or we see this as a standalone business that could be a profit center, or somewhere in between, right? We're willing to throw some money at this. If it turns out to be a huge profit center, great. If it doesn't, well, it's a marketing expense. Like, where on the spectrum were you guys, just out of curiosity?
Definitely the third one of just like, hey, I think, but like testing the waters, the third one. We were working on another game called Dead Island Epidemic that was a MOBA. Didn't make it out of beta before getting canceled, I believe. It actually was a lot of fun. But we were trying to make it like an online live game that will have updates, and that really needs to be thought about. I think to be done successfully needs to be thought about from day one with a game that's going to be an esport. It's trying to bolt it on after the fact. You get weird filming the game inside the game is not very good, right? Like original Counter-Strike matches were just player perspectives, and that was bad for viewers. It was terrible. But now there's flying cameras, and you go through walls, and there's professional like observers. Having that kind of tech built in.
There's veteran observers.
Like professional observers, who know the stuff. That's the things I think it need, like a game that's, if someone's going to make a game that's going to be an esport, that they're going to take a good run at it. Those are the kind of things that need to be thought about from a technical development perspective from the start. And, can you have some success after the fact? Sure. Stardew Valley had, it's on, speed runs and stuff. Okay, is that an esport? Kinda.
Arguably,
So,
yeah.
It's, there's a lot of people who don't know what they want, but it's like, oh, hey, we got to make our game be on Twitch. If we're on Twitch, we're successful. And it's like, well, your game doesn't really work on Twitch. That's just not built for it. So
is that because there's a flip side? There's kind of two questions I want to ask here. One is, in your opinion, is this kind of now like the albatross around traditional game development, which is because you do need to be on Twitch to have a presence, right? Because so much of gaming culture has moved into the live streaming world. But fundamentally, just some games aren't great for Twitch, even if they're excellent games. Do you see this in the talent market where, like, how do you see somebody who's like, do you have conversations with people where like you're an incredible streamer, but this game is terrible for you? It's holding you back. You need to transition. How does that
I'll let
play
Chris
out?
talk about that more, but even from my, so I can talk about like being a marketing guy, trying to get people to play my game. And, the games I work on, Saints Row 4, that was easy. Huge game, bombastic moments, a lot of like really cool stuff. Other games, were more challenging because the games, didn't have a huge marketing budget. It wasn't like top of mind for a streamer. It wasn't the latest, greatest game to come out. And so we had to, lower our expectations of which streamers we could get, how much money we'd have to pay for them. And like just all, do that because that's the reality of it. And so, I had to deal with some games that weren't, were not going to be that successful on Twitch. And, financially they did fine. They sold plenty of copies. They weren't breaking records, but they did fine, covered development costs, marketing costs. Everybody made money. Everyone was happy, but, no one remembers them now. And I think that the Twitch angle is some games, have that in mind from the start, and those games tend to be better. Other games are more, designed by the designers and artists who want to make a certain kind of game, and they don't particularly care if it does great. It's a perfect Twitch game. It can just be a great game on its own, and that is a success. So that's how I think that is. But, I think the biggest games on Twitch, some of them weren't designed with Twitch in mind, Among Us kind of famously, but they made it work, and then.
Yeah. Well, that's it, right? Like when you're designing a game, it's either going to be an esport or it's not, and you can take that into design consideration at the first opportunity. But people are going to make it an esport if they want to make it an esport. And I guess the gold standard for any esport or any quote unquote Twitch game is that it organically became that. And so like back in the day, the community used to build these. They used to make their own mods that had competitive settings and replay features. And, they'd make you record VODs directly on your monitor so that they could later go back and verify you weren't cheating. And like none of that was in the original game. Now you have games that come out that are designed for esports. Some succeed, some don't. You have games that come out that don't deploy any marketing budget and end up being massively popular, like multiplayer party games that are, stream friendly and so forth. And then you have other games where they deploy millions of dollars to get people to see it. And, fortunately or unfortunately, both strategies are successful in terms of getting people to play your game. And so, esports has always kind of been looked at as like kind of a bit of a marketing engine for the games themselves. And so in the case of Fortnite, for instance, there's maybe this is a hot take or not, but a lot of the players throughout the first year or two of Fortnite competitions felt like the competitions were them literally debuting new features for the consumers to consume. Like, oh, new boombox, like here's the best players in the world playing with this for the first time in the grand finals of their LAN event. So the players are livid about this because there's no consistency. It's very hard. Imagine if they like one day, like in the game 7 of the NBA finals, they went out and they're playing with a football instead of a basketball. Like, it's just little weird changes that, make a difference. But that was a really good marketing play for them. Epic's done a number of different things that were brilliant marketing plays. The creator code gets all the creators to advertise every item that gets released from the store. They pay the creators to incentivize them to do that, like on a revenue split. But, there's people that literally dispute the fact that Fortnite is an esport.
Yeah,
and
Paul does.
Yeah.
Paul does. But like
Yeah.
this is reaching deep here, and I don't actually believe what I'm saying. I'm overstating a point
Do it.
to but like, isn't this in some sense like what you're describing, isn't that good for the competitive players, right? Because at the end of the day, it's still a publisher. In many ways, it's a publisher-driven ecosystem, and the
Yeah.
support a game gets and the viewership a game gets is determined by the publisher's success, right? And so, yes, it's unfortunate. It makes the game less competitive at a high level if there's like just random stuff popping up. But a rising tide floats all boats. Isn't
Yeah.
it better to have a less competitive but more popular game? Like I know the perfect world is it's competitive and popular, right? But like if you're going to walk the tightrope, you know, one thing, and I will go out on a limb here and say one of the things I admired from Epic is I'm not sure it was the right strategy, but they were very intentionally launching features, as you said, to debut, you know, to be marketing. And
Yeah.
other people weren't doing that. And it was disrespectful to the community. But as you said, it maybe contributed to Fortnite's growth. And is that on balance a good thing?
Yeah, ultimately, I don't think you can argue that it's not a good thing. Like, of course, we want the competitive scene to thrive, and I do believe it's an amazing marketing engine for these titles. But the casual player base dictates, and that's where the dollars really come through. And Epic has done so many amazing things with Fortnite and just generally like building up their ecosystem. But the best thing they've done is generate a shit ton of money. I don't know if you can cuss on this show. I'm sorry, and I probably have been cussing this whole time, but
I think
forgive
it's
me.
fine.
Yeah, but so like you want it to be an esport, and like my heart is definitely in esports, but you can't deny the fact that the majority of their money comes from like mobile, comes from kids with their parents' credit cards. Hopefully not in all instances, but in a lot certainly. So like you want it to be successful, but at the same time, like you have to cater to where the money is ultimately coming from.
Yeah, William says Paul doesn't think it's. I don't think Fortnite's a legitimate esport. I think it's very clever marketing. I think that's what has always bothered me. When I said in 2018 and I wrote this article and I got a lot of flag, a lot of hate for it, where I said Fortnite esports are not real, will never survive, right? It's all propped up by Epic marketing dollars. I think I was sort of proven correct, but the business side of me loves it, right?
Yeah.
There's no doubt that it has worked spectacularly well. I think what I've always hated is the pretending, right? Like, let's not pretend that this is all about competition at the highest level. Like, it wouldn't be a third-person game to begin with if competition at the highest level was like, anytime you can stare at a wall and see the guy running at you, right? Like, to me, the competitive integrity sort of goes out the window. And so, it's one of these things where there's this balancing act, but I do admire the money they made. I guess, Chris, I want to come back to the changes in the talent market that you've seen as a lot of these big dollars have sort of, come in with Fortnite, with mobile, with all these other, massive changes, even just in the last 3 years or 5 years.
Yeah. Well, let me address your Fortnite point, and then I'll jump to the changes. But what I'll say about Fortnite is that is not an easy job for a pro player. Of all the esports where routine and practice is super, super important, Fortnite is insane. And in order to stay at the top, it's actually amazing that there's so many players. There's a handful of players that routinely are in the top 10, which for an open format esports scene where you effectively have to qualify for every single event through open qualifiers, like that is extremely stressful. So like, maybe it's not, a quote unquote, standard esport that has, standardized rules that don't evolve much. The meta stays, similar, and it closely parallels, traditional sports where they don't really change. You kind of know what you're going to get. Those players are definitely pros, and every single one of them is a little Kobe. They all have that killer gene where they are, they really straddle the line of insanity and brilliance, and maybe they're the same things, but like these guys they're still putting in 12 to 14 hours a day. They're putting in more hours than a lot of pros in other titles. They're in private servers competing against each other, practicing their edits, practicing like different building techniques. Like it's insane. And so about your question about like how have things changed, esports has been like greatly professionalized, and so like there's been direct changes on the contracts. There's been direct changes with traditional sports entities and traditional corporate entities coming into this space and deploying a lot of capital. While and so that's like professionalized the industry. The fact that there are some competent agents, some not so competent agents, but there are agents in the industry, there are lawyers in the industry that are looking out for the players. So the contracts have been like greatly cleaned up. There are things that are customary now that weren't the case 4 years ago, such as players keeping the majority, if not all, of their independent sponsorship revenue, as distinguished from a team sponsor where the whole team is sponsored, the team's IP is licensed to the brand. Individual sponsor is just the player providing services to that brand. The teams used to be able to at least have the right to collect all of that revenue, and in fact would stop the independent sponsorship from ever having ink to paper. So it's been professionalized a lot, but from my day, let's talk about like the player experience. Like this is a legitimate career now. And so there are young people across the world that are aspiring and looking up to these role models and these pro players, saying like, I want to be that when I grow up. And even better, their parents aren't shitting on them for having that opinion, which was the case when I was younger. And so one of our Rocket League clients, Garrett G, just won RLCS, qualified for the U.S. Olympic team. He's going to be playing Rocket League in the Olympics, or iteration of it rather. But he gave a brilliant interview after I think like the semifinals in the last RLCS season, where he said 3 seasons ago, which was a year and a half ago, like their strategies weren't that advanced. Like they were winning games because they were more mechanically skilled. Now, a year and a half removed from that, every team has coaches. They're having to adjust strategies in game, like completely change the way they play. It's not just a matter of, like they were better, like we were a little sloppy. They're like, we lost because we didn't play more aggressively when we knew we needed to. And so like they have very professional coaches that are telling them exactly what they need to do, and the players are making like on the fly changes like that. They are highly professional, and like to be a top player or a top team in Rocket League right now is insane because of the amount of preparation, but also it requires the Kobe gene and the mental ability to stop your brain, stop your emotions, pivot, and execute on that. And that's a traditional sports requirement.
Chris, just to kind of dig in, connect something that you've been brought up. You brought up kind of your time in corporate law and the 2,000 hours being
Yeah.
brutal.
I didn't
And then
get
you're
close
talking
to it,
about
but yeah.
pros doing 12 to 14 hours a day in esports, right? Like, is this something that needs to be addressed? Is this just the nature of our sport? Is something where you can train extensively and for long periods of time for? So like if, Tom Brady could, play 16 hours worth of football a day, he would and should? Or is there something going on here, and this is an area that needs to be addressed? Just like, you mentioned like cleaning up contracts or something that needed to be addressed.
Well, I don't know. Like maybe it kind of spans from the the mental belief that like here all things are equal except for how hard I work, and I'm going to work harder. Like maybe my reflexes are 1 degree better than yours just inherently, but like I'm going to work 10 hours harder than you, and over the course of the year I'm going to put in an extra 500 hours. And you've always heard the thing like, oh, you can't be an expert on something until you do it for 10,000 times or 10,000 hours or whatever it may be. And like that's certainly the case here. And if you go back to 2018 Fortnite VODs of those tournaments, you'll see that they weren't very good. And now they're insanely quick. You can't even watch what they're doing. It's so quick. Like, thank God the servers lag, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to see what they were doing. And so, I apologies, I got a little distracted from your original question, but ultimately, like these games require a whole lot, and I don't know if it's a working condition thing where like maybe the law needs to come in and say like, hey, like these guys are they are employees, and you can subject to overtime rules and all that kind of stuff. Like I don't know, in games where you're kind of playing on your own behalf, which is Fortnite solo. Go. Yeah.
Let me ask a more direct. I mean, just and again, if we don't want to go here, we can. But like, as a talent agent, do you feel that you should be setting guidelines for how your players play?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm just asking. It's not meant to be confrontational. It's just like a generally curious. Like, how far should a talent agent reach into the practice regimens and the lifestyle of the people that you are part of your agency?
Yeah, well, now you're asking, effectively about like my worldview and like how does that affect the way that I represent our talent and like the
Yeah, and I
reality.
think your world feels super important here because you're a
Yeah,
major influencer in the talent market in esports.
yeah.
Like how you think about it might be how the market moves.
Yeah. And so, unfortunately, it's kind of always been, direct one-to-one advice and it comes from how I've lived my life, right? Like I did exceptionally well in law school, but when everybody else was, studying for their 13th through 15th hour on the day, like I was chilling with friends. Like I was reading a book, like I was messing around with music or going to parties or whatever it may be. And I always credited a lot of my success to like having that mental balance. And I was actually far more balanced then than I am now as I pull these 12 to 14-hour days, trying to help these kids. And, the reality is like, yeah, uh, maybe the teams need to put limitations on it, but it just gets really difficult when you're controlling your own schedule. Like there's a good argument that Fortnite players are validly labeled as independent contractors because they're not participating on a team, they're setting their own schedule. And if they're a contractor, like it's pretty hard to put real limitations on that. And so, yeah, like I think a lot of it like could hopefully, my experience and telling my players that they should have a good, social work life balance. And, I've credited my success with that. And so like I try to instill the same values in them and, I'll help them, advise them on their relationships, advise them on, finding time to spend time with their families. The young minor players are a lot of their parents will call me and be like, hey, like, he's really struggling with this, like can you talk to him, or whatever it may be. And so like we go in and fulfill that role, even though that's not a money generating role. But it's super important. And so, unfortunately, I don't have a great answer for you. Like, yeah, like we try to take that into account, and like, I try to keep players like reasonable and balanced. But like at the end of the day, like they're gonna do whatever it takes to win. And nobody was going to stop Kobe from, flying in the helicopter to the gym 3 hours early and, putting up shots and doing that the night before. In fact, like they supported him when he was getting all of his teammates to go to the gym early and play. And so like, like, yeah, like there are issues with overtime, there are issues with potential labor violations and things like that. But like these guys are professionals and they're going to do what it takes to win.
And you're competing for a spot to play video games for a living.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's naturally going to be incredibly competitive, just like being a pro golfer is competitive or being a, pro basketball player. In some ways, it's a dream job for just about most people. I think naturally it's going to be competitive.
It's not an easy job though, right? Like
no,
I think
no question.
A lot of people don't understand like the life of a streamer. And I have pro players that retire and they're like, oh, I'm going to chill so hard now that I'm a streamer. And like, guess what, dude? Like you're not. Like that's just as hard or harder. And you're going to have to put in the time. And when you're not live, you're thinking about what you're going to do when you're live. Like it's, it's a very much a more than a full-time job. So like, succeeding in this industry is tough.
Can we touch on that, guys? And it's a question for both of you, and I want to frame it in a slightly different way than I think we've touched on it in on the podcast in the past. And that is from a talent agency standpoint. If you could only sign, because talent is a competitive space too, right? If you guys are competing for talent and trying to sign the best talent, what is your preference? Would you rather have, the very best League of Legends player in the world, or would you rather have someone who you just think is an incredibly entertaining personality? How do you guys think about, who is the more valuable? And I don't want, this is not like Sophie's choice here. I don't want you to, pick between your kids, but it's like, I always find this interesting conversation around entertainment versus sort of pure esports talent. And how do you guys think about value there?
Yeah, well, let me start off that. I think that they're both valuable because it's also what their goals are. Because when you're they're, the best League of Legends player in the world, great, but they might not be a content creator. They might, their focus is winning on a big team in League of Legends, winning LCS, and, getting showered with, huge prize winnings and whatever, but they're not really interested in individual sponsorships, perhaps, or creating content or having a YouTube channel that they hang out with their friends and play, scrims with, or streaming their scrims they play with their friends. They just don't do that. They focus on that, but then they might be, that might be incredibly lucrative for them and their the agency. That's great. They're making a ton of money doing that, and that's their focus. And then you have an incredibly, entertaining person who gets, is racking up the biggest views on Twitch, and then, gets big sponsorships and gets, for all kinds of brands and stuff like that. And they're both super valuable to we'd want to sign both. And I don't
do brands
they're both great, I guess.
I mean, Duncan, if you look at sort of all the inbound or all the conversations you have with brands, over the last 12 months, are most of them coming to you saying, hey, we really want to sign this great player because he's won so much or she's won so much? Or is it like, hey, we saw this person stream and they did this, really hilarious thing? Like, are the brands looking for entertainment or are they looking for winning?
It depends on the brand, right? Like some brands want to connect themselves with the winningest team, right? Like, luxury brands typically want to associate themselves with, winning teams, not necessarily, who's got the most views in a hot tub stream. Whereas other brands are like, heck yeah, get us the dude, painting himself in a hot tub because he's got 20 million views a day. I want that guy. So again, it's what, the brands are doing, what the brands want, who they want to work with, who they want to know about them, right? Like they want the audience of which one do they want the audience of? But
I
Chris
guess
is the one who actually works with those guys.
Chris, for you, from a strategy standpoint for Evolved, where do you see most of Evolve's growth coming in the next 5 years or 10 years? Is it more that pure competitive esports side, or is it more the entertainment content creator side?
Yeah. Well, your question sounds simple, but it's arguably not very simple at all, right? Like I can talk from the Evolve perspective. We look for sellable assets, and so if you're the best player at your super popular game, like that's a sellable asset, and some brands will be interested in that, just like Duncan said. But I can speak pretty bluntly and say brands didn't give a shit about esports pros for the last 4 years because that's not where the eyeballs were. You couldn't put a Red Bull hat on a player and have him walk up to the Overwatch League stage wearing that Red Bull hat. Like those rights weren't there yet. And so, what I will say though is over the past 6 months, over the past year, brands care more and more about esports pro because of what we've always said about them. They're a lot bigger than their follower count. If they're playing with millions of viewers on the tournament feed every single week, there's millions of people that know who they are, even if they have 20,000 followers on Twitter. And there was a player on I think it was like Unicorns of Love or something, the LEC European League of Legends team, and I don't even think he had a Twitter, and he was like popping off in really high level games, and they're shouting him out and they're like, he doesn't have a Twitter, he doesn't believe in social media, but like this kid's awesome. I looked at him, he's a good looking kid, top of his game, like very marketable, but he's not marketing himself. And so like when we look for talent, like I said, like always look for sellable assets. And over the past year, and actually just over the past history, like ever since Twitch came into popularity and like sponsorship started happening on there, all the money was being funneled toward the entertainers. And that's who was getting the sponsorships on the individual level, at least. That's who, was getting the platform deals from Twitch. That's who was, ultimately generating a lot of money. And so, I think a lot of our growth is going to come from influencers and continuing to figure out better ways to monetize for those influencers, whether it's the platform deals or whatever it may be, sponsorships, etc. Like we're figuring out how to extract maximum reasonable dollar for those talents. And the second probably biggest area of growth for us is what Duncan and I are up to, which is the corporate representation. There are more and more brands every single day, more and more traditional celebrities, athletes, musicians, etc., that are trying to come into the space and understand it and deploy capital in a way that makes sense for them. And so over the past 10 years, there's been a lot of money that was irresponsibly spent in this industry, whether they were not so much like high player salaries and stuff, like although that it has been the case in some titles at certain points in time, but like spending money on just stupid stuff. And so over the past 2 years, it's crazy to say that, but since lockdown started March 2020, most of the orgs were shifting their focus towards bringing in content creators because, one, they didn't really know their value. Some of them didn't really have agents, but they certainly didn't know how the org was valuing them. So they would bring them in, get decent deals for them, and guess what? Like the orgs make most of their money from sponsorship sales. Those sponsorship sales, or at least the amount of the sponsorships, are rooted in the number of eyeballs on their team, on their players, and they package up all their players and they sell sponsorships against all of their socials. So, ethically right, legally right, or wrong, like that's how the business works. And creators are they're the blood of that. So
if that's the case, then when you have, the greatest League of Legends player signed to your agency,
or the greatest up and coming hero is the Storm
Yeah.
player.
William, we're gonna get to your pitch at the end. You got to listen to the end to hear William's
the
pitch
Boomer
here.
League MVP next year. Yeah.
But is part of the evolved value proposition then to go to that person and say, hey, you be you. We want you to be the greatest League of Legends player. Keep playing League, 10 hours a day, but we can make you more sellable. We can make you more entertaining. Like, is that part of the value proposition also?
Yeah, it's certainly like a part of it, right? Like a lot of what we do on the esports side is like brand strategy advice, like on the players and their individual brands and how they should handle their esports career. It's not just, finding them deals, it's, massaging those deals, overseeing those deals, and, ultimately helping them like maximize their relationship with their team, with their sponsors, with their fans. And, I do want to take a second to correct the record a little bit, because influencers have been one of the biggest points of growth for us over the last couple of years, like developing the sponsorship department, bringing in bigger and bigger influencers. We were the biggest in esports for a long time, but it was only, a couple, I think, 6 months ago or so that we became, the biggest for creators as well on Twitch. And like a lot of hard work went into that, but, the money was certainly better there than it was taking 5 or 10% of a, reasonable esports player salary. And so, another, like the third area of growth, which is why we still care so much about esports outside of, it being near and dear to my heart, is certainly esports, right? Like Valorant is just starting to pop. Player salaries are still doing pretty good across the board in like most of these titles. And those salaries will keep going up as the sponsorship dollars come in, as the viewers increase. And, we're going to be there to help those guys, help kind of shepherd them through their careers. They have a very high income earning potential.
See, this is something I wonder about, and there's not an answer here, but I'm just gonna put it, we have this odd dichotomy in esports, the entertainer and the competitor, right? But traditional sports, that really doesn't exist, right? Like the competitor is the entertainer. The most saleable, to use your word, of the competitive players become the entertainers for their league effectively, right? Is that where esports goes, right? Are we just in this early stage phenomenon right now where, because to your point, things like salaries and the competitive side are still coming up, right? Like, let's be honest, even the greatest League of Legends player is not getting paid the same as an NFL player today, right?
Yeah.
Like, are we just early enough that the monetary?
There might be a little overlap there.
Well, maybe maybe you guys would know more.
William, I hear TSM.
The
TSM may have a few bucks to throw around.
The winners of the international
TSM,
more
FTX
than
or whatever, but yeah.
Of
but the point I'm making, that like, are we just at this early stage in an ecosystem where it looks bifurcated, but in reality, as the competitive incentives continue to grow, will just look like regular sports? Or do you think there's something fundamentally different about esports, and there always will be two categories?
So it's tough to say. Like, I think we are seeing a little bit of like a WWE effect in esports, where the players that are going out on stage and being like extremely loud and being funny and doing their dances, like they are becoming the crowd favorites, which turns into followers, which turns into bigger salaries with their orgs. And so like there's a lot of economic utility to being that outspoken, like, I'm the champ, can't fuck with me, like type person in this industry. But with that said, like even in the NBA, and I don't want to poke holes in your argument, because honestly it's like a really good argument, like, but there are a couple players in the NBA like Kawhi Leonard and others that are superstar players that really don't do well on the camera, and probably because they don't want to be on camera. And so like I think there's always going to be a little bit of a bifurcation there, but you know, the reality is like the people that are at the top of these games, like they're at the top because they're kind of psychotic. Like, you know, like they're out there putting in the hours, they're putting in the time, and like they want to be the best. And those are typically the people that will also be comfortable in front of the camera. And it's, you know, a little bit different because the people that become esports players, like they weren't necessarily the most, you know, socially competent people like throughout their entire lives, but we see them coming into form, we see them coming, you know, out of their shells and becoming comfortable in front of camera. And I can't tell you how many players have told me like, I hate streaming, I'm never going to stream, and then a year later they're like, oh, like, you know, I kind of caught my rhythm, like streaming's a little bit fun, and now I'm earning money doing it. And like they see that, you know, building your brand, building up your stream, building your YouTube is one of the only ways to add longevity to your career. And so like from like a simple like cost benefit analysis, like most of them will be those outspoken entertainers, even if they don't want to be. And I think that's kind of the natural trajectory that we're on, you know, despite the fact that we're all, you know, quote unquote nerds in this industry that, you know, have a little social anxiety. And maybe that's why we're here, you know, but you find your place here.
Guys, I have a question that I ask many of our guests, and I think you guys might have really interesting insight because of the time you spend with brands. But how big do you feel is the education gap with brands currently? Like, where are we at? Do most brands sort of know what you're talking about when you knock on the door, or do you think there's still an education gap? And if you think there still is one, how long do you think until there isn't one?
I think that there are some large companies that have really good gaming departments, divisions inside of them. Red Bull is one that you know, they'll hire from the industry, from the gaming side of things, and be like, look, we don't really, you know, we're over here in Switzerland or Austria, we don't really know what's going on in gaming so much, but we're going to hire the right people. And they do, and they really know what's up. They're going out, they know what they want, they know how to get it, and they're going to do it themselves. There's a few brands that are really good at that. Most brands are like, we'd like to do one esport, please. They're aware of esports. They don't know what valuations are, what they want to do, what's available, what inventory can they buy, how do they deploy capital against their goals and objectives. They come to us and they're like, so we got a bunch of money and we'd like to do, we want to use, you know, esports and influencers to sell our product. Okay, cool. All right, great. You're aware that's how that works. Cool. What kind of budget do you have? We don't know, but we've got a bunch of money. What should be our budget? Well, yeah. This is hard already. And so, and then there's brands who show up and they're just like, we don't do this. We don't know anything. How do we get started? We work with a lot of brands kind of in those latter two categories who don't, you know, they know they want to do it. It's important. They know this is where the market's going. There's a lot of value there, and they just don't know what to do or how to do it or what they can do with their products or services. And that's why they hire us, is to help them figure that out. And sometimes it's, you know, changing a lot.
I mean, Duncan, would you say that there's no situations anymore where you actually have to explain to people why this is important or why they should even be thinking about it? Do you feel like most show up at least acknowledging that now?
Yeah, I'd say that, well, they get it now because of, you know, the CEO saw Ninja on CNN and went, how much is he making? You know, like that quickly filtered down across almost everyone we talked to. Like, no one's coming up and be like, in 2021, no one's being like, I don't know what Twitch is, which was not the case 3 years ago. You know, everybody knows what it is now. Everyone's heard of, you know, knows Ninja. If maybe they won't know what he looks like, but they're aware of him. I mean, and I don't think it's definitely, you know, massive education gap on like how to do something in the space. They don't have the first idea. Because, you know, some people just be like, hey, cool, we'll go to Ninja, we'll pay him, you know, however much, and he'll play our game for 40 hours a week. That's great. Let's do that. And, you know, you know, it's a shock that I think do that.
Yeah, I think the biggest change, like, is, you yeah, more brands understand it, they get it, but like esports is like a really big buzzword right now. And so several years ago when we'd talk to brands, it'd be like, hey, like, let me tell you all about esports. And they'd be like, what? And then you'd be like, oh wait, hold on a second, like we'll get there. I'm just going to start from the top. Now it's like, let me tell you about esports, and they're like, tell me more. And that interest in the industry, in addition to like how successful Twitch has become and how many people are actually watching and digesting live stream content with an easy accessibility to gaming related content, like it's just all trending in the right direction, and more brands are at the very least interested in it, and that's where we can kind of come in and add value there.
So what do you think are the remaining hurdles then? Because, getting brands, I think, to that final distance where they're completely familiar, they know what they want, and they come to you because you're the place to do it, where the gap in education is as small as you can get it. Where you just explained, pretty much where brands currently are in various stages. What do you think gets them to the next level where not only esports is finally in that mainstream area, but brands, people that maybe aren't in esports but now know of it, also know it the way they know traditional sports or traditional entertainment properties? What do you think gets us to close the gap further?
I think having more activate, as brands, work with the new environment that it is, right? They might already know how to work with traditional sports because they've been working with traditional sports for 20 years or longer, right? They know what the inventory is available. They know what prices are. They know all the details because they've doing it, and they've been able to hire someone who was at the agency that was selling them the stuff. They're now working in-house, right? Like that's traditionally how a lot of businesses learn that space. And right now in this world, there's not a lot of people that are able to be cycled out that are like, oh yeah, I did 10 years at an esports agency, I'm now ready to get hired out at RJ Nabisco or something to help you guys in your esports stuff. That's just not there. It's not big enough for that yet. And so I don't think that knowledge is out there. But when you have brands that go, I don't care, go find those people and hire them, they end up doing really well. And that's, I think, how you get them there is just more exposure, more activating, test and learns, spending money in the space, seeing how it goes.
Yeah. I think the short answer there is just time, right? Like there are education programs popping up all over the country, hopefully all over the world, that are, hopefully trying to build curriculum that develops some sort of understanding and expertise as to how the marketing and stuff works in this industry. And in the absence of the way you cut the time down is by hiring someone that's proven and competent to help you activate in a organic, meaningful, authentic way. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there that are representing themselves to be experts in the field or top esports or gaming consultants, and they're not really. But the reality is, like Duncan said, the test and learn there is still good. Like time in that instance will get you there because you'll spend the money, you'll learn the lessons, and maybe the guy you hired, the consultants, maybe he learns a little bit too, or she or whatever. But ultimately, like time is the difference. And what Duncan and I are trying to do on the corporate representation is to shrink that gap, to shrink that time.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I know we're running out of time here, but I want to get to at least one news story. Unless Jimmy or William, did you have any other questions? I just wanted to give you, but I want to get to at least one news story, and this one was an interesting one, guys. It was from Esports Insider, and the headline here is "We Are Nations Joins Esports Fashion Week," and I will just put this next to another story, which was from WWD, talking about Ralph Lauren getting into gaming with a partnership with G2 Esports. So two fashion stories. I obviously want you guys to comment on these two stories and how you think sort of fashion fits into esports, but maybe more specifically also how merch sort of fits into the picture of your talent. Yeah, I maybe have made quite a bit of fun of hoodie orgs on this podcast, but I'm curious how you guys feel fashion and merchandise sort of fits into the talent picture, and also just curious to get your comments on something like an esports fashion week.
I'll let Duncan handle the merch conversation, but what I want to say just real quick is like from the org's perspective, they've struggled in a lot of cases to recoup the money that they've invested here, and many of them raised funds, 3 years, 5 years ago, and a lot of those investors are now coming back, hoping to see returns on their money, etc. And the orgs are trying to pivot and find different ways to monetize, and so like they're not selling out stadiums, they're not getting local broadcast deals for hundreds of millions of dollars, and so like it's not easy being an org right now. And the hoodie movement is what's allowing these orgs to kind of transcend gaming team, gaming roster, even transcend like production company and become more of a lifestyle brand. And so like I think if I'm blanking on the name of that old store that used to be in every single mall. That's not Hot Topic, but it's kind of like that. But if that was around today, it would have Spencer's. No, isn't that the sex toy one or something? I don't know. Get out of here, Duncan. But no, but that's the right. Like they have to figure out how to monetize, and they're creating ways to engage with their fans. And I was at the dog park yesterday, and this dude shows up in a T1 sweater, and like that's insane. Like that's awesome. There's phase stuff all over Hollywood, like signs, plastered onto walls. And like, that's how these gaming orgs are going to get next level.
Do you think Esports Fashion Week though has gone too far? Is that like, is that one step too far, Duncan?
So yes.
Okay.
Look at any of the other traditional sports. Is there an NFL Fashion Week? I mean, also
no,
the thing.
It's a good point.
Esports is also not monolithic in a sense that you don't have a sports fashion week for traditional sports at all, nor do you have like an NFL or NHL one. So it's a little weird, and I'm not very familiar with them, but I bet if we looked at who's behind it, we would see merch and apparel makers are the advisory board to esports, which is not necessarily bad. That's who's behind like New York Fashion Week is, all the major design houses. But okay, sure. The thing is like also if you're pushing a traditional sports org, like the NFL, like I don't think the Patriots have their own couture fashion line. Right. Like, I mean, so it's a little weird. It's also, I make a lot of merch.
Although they sell they make a lot of money selling jerseys.
Well, yeah. And then they hire Fanatics to make all the jerseys. Like, cool. I mean, sure. I get it. Fanatics might be not behind, but involved in Esports Fashion Week, maybe. I don't know. Yep. The Fanatics, I remember when the Fanatics first showed up in game, they showed up to a Esports Biz Day conference somewhere in LA. They sent like a junior QA intern with instructions to go talk to all of the heads of all the esports orgs to lock up all of their jersey rights. And he expected to do that as like a 19-year-old. It was amazing. I'm sitting here watching like, this is going to be fun to watch. And so I think it's a little weird because the teams don't want to work together because the teams like, work with Puma or Adidas or Ralph Lauren, and cool. They're not going to collaborate across each other unless they have to. Like the Overwatch League jerseys are all made by Fanatics, and that's how that's going to go. So it's a little weird. And having been making stuff for esports teams, all of them want to have a lifestyle brand. Is what they want to do. That's what we want to be more than a team. We want to be a lifestyle.
So Duncan, where's the innovation going to come? Because that's all we hear now, right? They all want to be lifestyle brands. Everyone has the same merch.
They all have the exact same merch, and I showed them what would be involved in them having, because like, oh, here's a lifestyle. We want this lifestyle stuff, and I'm like, great. This is really expensive to make. These materials are very high quality. They're like, oh, we want to make this. I'm like, this is Turkish cotton. This would cost you $200 to make, because they want 50 units. Because everyone thinks when an esports team is like buying like a mid-level NBA team in terms of size, oh, we're going to sell tens of thousands of jerseys, tens of thousands of hoodies, whatever. Cool. Yeah, they sell like hundreds, not thousands. I mean, like hundreds of. And so they they learn the hard way. And the biggest teams, the Cloud9s, yeah, they do better than that for sure. Enough that Puma pays attention to go, oh, we're going to make some lines. Champion pays attention to, oh, you guys are moving enough that we can work with you on some stuff. But typically it's just logo slaps, which you have a lower quantity to do. So
So you
all
don't
these
get
esports-
excited by this Ralph Lauren G2 thing. It's not different to you in any way. It's just a more upscale
I
brand,
would
maybe.
be-
Or
I mean, the Louis Vuitton LCS thing, I think was special. And they made like less than 100 units available to the general public or something insane, like per item. It's like a marketing thing. It's not in any way like a revenue driver for them because everything sold out instantly. And I'm like, well, those aren't gamers buying $9,500 bags. That's not quite how that works. So Esports Fashion Week isn't, that doesn't sound anything special, but I think the G2 Ralph Lauren thing, that's cool. When you're dealing with like a designer house that's going to push things for you in a new, interesting way. It's bringing esports to a new audience that probably doesn't pay a lot of attention to esports. I think that's really cool. And I think it's like when you see, a top tier traditional sports athlete posing, they're on the cover of Vogue dressed in some really cool traditional designer outfit. That's awesome. And I think now that might be an esports player next time. That's great. So yeah. I think that it's not, the clothing might not be interesting to me, but I think the exposure to the new audiences, I think is going to be really cool. I don't think it's bringing designers into the esports world. I think it's bringing esports into the world of design that way. I think that's where the value is to me.
But we're kind of in this like period of time where, looks kind of like the 90s, like 2000s, where everyone's wearing, like beat up shoes, like, weird, like skinny girl jeans, whatever it may be. But, they have like super expensive watches on, or they have like a designer like wallet. And like, that's kind of the direction that we're headed. And so like, yeah, like I agree with Duncan, the Fashion Week is a little bit weird for esports, and like weird that they would have that like nuance to it. But because of where the industry is going, and we've seen with I think Fnatic did a Gucci watch collaboration with very limited releases, like that was pretty cool. Big, designer brand coming into the space. The same thing with, G2, who just generally kind of kills it on all of their partnerships, but, they're bringing it in, and it might track the way that Duncan said, where it's, consumers in the esports and gaming fields, now being exposed to an old school brand like Ralph Lauren. And, the reality is like, I haven't seen anything Ralph Lauren in a while, right? Like I haven't. And before Champion made their big gaming play 2 years ago, I didn't see that much Champion stuff either. And so, let's look at Champion versus Fila. Well, Fila didn't make a gaming play. Champion made a large gaming play, a large Twitch play. And I can't say, conclusively that that's the difference between Champion and Fila and how much Champion killed it over the last 2 years. They kind of tailed off now, I think, but like they were killing it. Everybody was wearing those big chunky shoes. They had the fanny packs again. They had like the side swoop, like purse bags, they had the hoodies, they had it all. And a lot of that was by virtue of coming into this space and advertising here, working with the teams, doing, limited collaborations and releases. And so, as weird as it may be, the fact that it's happening and the designer brands are recognizing that this is a key demographic where they can at the very least establish early brand loyalty, but also potentially sell products, like that's a really good sweet spot to be. And the reality is XQC sold out his G Fuel flavor in like 2 minutes.
I tried buying it, Chris. Yeah. I tried.
But you're too slow, but that's also why you're not in the Overwatch League.
And this is
I do want to loop
and the CEO of G Fuel is a friend. He was our first guest on the podcast. I still couldn't get it.
Yeah, that's the sickest burn, Chris. That's why you're not in the Overwatch League. I'm gonna save that one for the.
Yeah.
I want to jump in on piggyback on what Chris says. One of the reasons that I think Champion has been successful lately is they have a gaming team. I've talked to them. They have a dedicated gaming team that is like, oh yeah, we work with our esports teams. We understand the space. We understand what people want. And if they just had a regular, like traditional partnerships manager who doesn't understand the gaming space in that slot, as maybe Fila does, I don't know anything about Fila, it doesn't surprise me at all that Champion succeeded because they hired someone who knew the space. And I think that's if you want the secret to success, is hire someone who understands the space, trust them, empower them to make the right decisions, and there you go.
Yeah. And
When I
maybe
heard,
G2
sorry,
is,
go ahead, Chris.
yeah, maybe G2 is fulfilling that role for Ralph Lauren, like maybe, but at the end of the day, like G2 is utilizing this as an opportunity to like make really compelling content. Like that commercial was awesome. Like the
Mhm.
player in the commercial looked awesome. Like he looked cool. Like you know, it's not my style, but like maybe it is after seeing that. And I think that's the power of advertising in this space where you care about the people in the commercials. And that's the fundamental difference between running a Twitch ad or sponsoring a Twitch streamer versus doing a Super Bowl commercial. Like most people walk away during commercials, or because it's Super Bowl and they want to watch it, like it just turns out they don't care about most of the products being advertised. But like when your favorite streamer tells you about his favorite mouse or, you know, his favorite clothing, because guess what? Everyone wears clothing just the same as everyone uses a mouse who's watching that. Like people care about that, and that leads to sales, that leads to high conversion. And that's really the opportunity that esports and gaming present to brands and to the world, is making your dollar go further. And, you know, at a certain point, like that will equal out.
It's just with esports and fashion, I feel like it's a lot of the same right now, right? And it's more teams like either hiring a designer or partnering with a designer, and the merch all is sort of the same. I think when I saw Esports Fashion Week, what I was hoping for deep down was like, I want the person who did like the weapon camo in Call of Duty to like make a cool hoodie now. Like that would be interesting for me. You know, Ralph Lauren, yeah, okay. But like something different where actually we're bringing esports or, you know, gaming into fashion in a more, in sort of the reverse way. Guys, before we wrap up, I just, we have to do this because I promised it. William, here's your shot, my friend.
All right. All right.
Are you ready?
Can I set the stage here?
Yeah,
So,
Duncan, please.
So yeah, William is an aspiring professional Heroes of the Storm player.
Yes.
And Chris is the #1 esports agent, and signing with him will guarantee you financial success and superstardom across the world.
Yeah,
so
that's ridiculous.
William, no pressure.
He's
but
joking. He's joking.
Yeah, this is your only chance to
Look,
make
guys,
it in Heroes
I'm
of the Storm.
I'm not gonna lie. I think you have a once in a lifetime opportunity here. First of all, you want to talk about saleable assets. Handsome, no. Charismatic, no. But loquacious, yes. Extremely loquacious. I would be excellent at filling dead air on camera on a stream. Now let's talk about the competitive side. I bet you have a lot of masters, challengers, you know, the highest ranked players signed. It's time to diversify into the Silver League, specifically Silver 1. That's me, yes, with a 1 after it. Top of silver. So you can say I'm king of my game, but it's a game you don't yet represent. So, you know, I could keep going, but don't you want all this? Because there can be more together. Bam.
Are the servers even still up for that game?
You know, Chris, they still are. Yeah, the game still patches.
Chris,
so you know, and you know, I would
Bring
say judge the player, not the game. You know, judge the player, not the game.
Who do you main?
I mean, I'm considered in the Silver League. Diversity of play is really important. So I mean, you might say
let's call it flex.
Flex. You might say I mean everyone.
Okay, well,
And that's cool. That's variety. That's what we want. It's diversified content, right? Like it can be like, who's he going to play on stream? Nobody knows. They're all viable at that level of competition.
Yeah, so not only are you extremely good looking, very articulate, you could be a marketing powerhouse for any organization that you sign to, but you're also the top of your game and one of the most flexible players in the game, if not ever in esports. So I'm liking this.
It's difficult to
I can sell
find
this.
benchmarks, but yes, I would say that. And then, you know, one more thing I'd point out, and it's small, but you know, I want to call it's there. It's commitment. I've been with Heroes of the Storm since the beta, baby. And, you know, I think in the end of the day, authenticity counts for something, and I have an authentic love for the Nexus.
Despite all the shame and embarrassment that comes along with playing Heroes of the Storm still.
I mean, we need to see if your viewers will follow you to a new game. And that's the ultimate, that's the pinnacle of marketability, is to know that you can do whatever you want and your fans still care.
My viewers followed me to this podcast, Chris.
In defense of my friend and co-host here, I will say the most requested episode, like live stream that we've had, is not, hey, let's talk about these other business things. It's let's see you and William play some game, which I think is hilarious because I don't know what game we're gonna play, William and I. But
yeah, I can tell that William's a fragger. I can tell he's got it pulsing through his veins.
Yep.
You know, and on top of that, he's jacked.
I don't when I boot up a game.
This is good.
When I boot up a game, you know how most games have KDA. My games only show the K and the A. They know I don't need that D column, so get it right out of there.
Yeah, you can't divide by 0.
Exactly right. Yeah. I don't know what it's like. It's funny, you know, people. It's like the designers put in man. You must know this. There's a lot of work into the death animation and, you know, the return gameplay loops and everything. I've never seen those.
You didn't even download the textures.
I go and delete those texture packs. That's right. I go straight into the file. I'm not going to need these, taking up hard drive space.
So if you've ever lost a game, would you say it's entirely on the backs of your teammates? You were not strong enough to carry them, which is why you're at the top of Silver 1.
Yeah, I mean, you know, let's be honest, right? I mean, you can certainly blame your teammates. That's extremely positive and constructive, and all the best, you know, athletes do that.
It's great in MOBAs. I do it all the time.
100%, yeah. You can also blame your ISP. That's super popular. Probably true. Hardware failure is another big one for me. It's just crazy. Like whenever I'm about to get, you know, like again, and I'm not saying this happens for like whenever I'm about to get the big, you know, shot, like it's just, this mouse pad, you know, it's tough. So yeah, there's. I'm not saying that there aren't downsides to being the best, but you know, yeah, I would outsource that. I would outsource that.
Do you have any existing sponsorship deals that you can, you know, bring with you? Because so when we will have to have carve outs when you get signed, we'll need to know about your existing deals.
You know what I would say? This seems like it's getting pretty serious, guys. I think we should take this offline and really explore the operation.
I got a team in mind that would sign you to a multi-year deal and pay you an exposure. How does that sound?
Well, you know,
this is now this is disappointing.
Yeah, now this is disappointing. Pay you an exposure feels like that's code for that's the soft letdown.
that was old esports. That
was Chris. Let me as William's friend. Let me advocate for him. Think of the publicity we could get with like a $500 million deal here. Think of that press release. How awesome that would be. It could be over like 1,000 years, but it would make headlines.
You know, could be performance incentive triggered too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Is Silver 1 the highest rank in Silver? Is that how it works in that game?
You know, it's difficult because I've never been above Silver 1. So, you know, I don't know what comes after that hill, but I'm assuming the 1 is the peak. Yeah.
It's probably not Silver 2.
No, I don't think, because I was there. I was in Silver 2 for a while. We don't talk about those days.
Yeah, those are dark days.
For sure. It's tough. Yeah,
guys, what I'm hearing here is for sure the professor is going to be repped by Evolved. I think this is a no-brainer.
We'll fly you out to the building, helicopter tour of LA, and then take you into the signing suite, the money suite as we call it.
The Harlem Globetrotters are starting an esports team. Their first title is Heroes of the Storm, and you're in there, buddy.
Guys, I love it. Thank you.
Duncan, Chris, how can people find you if you want to be found, or how can they follow Evolved, what they're doing, what you guys are doing there, or you personally? Where can they find you?
I am at Dunkman, DUNKMAN, on every platform. I think Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, LinkedIn. So that's where I'm at. So hit me up on any of those. I'm always online.
Yeah. The agency is evolvetalent.com. I think it's at Evolve Talent on Twitter. I'm at Esports Agent on Twitter. But if you're a business looking to make a play in gaming, go ahead and email myself or Duncan directly at chris@evolvetalent.com, and we'll take a look at that. So yeah.
We've got a big following on LinkedIn, guys. Is it okay if they reach out to you on LinkedIn too? A lot of brands
that's an interesting platform, but I check it
on the business side.
So,
yeah. I mean,
I'm a LinkedIn guy. I do biz dev, so I'm on LinkedIn every day. So sure, that would be great. Duncan
Stanley, there you go, on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, thank you. Thank you for being on the show. Jimmy, William, thank you guys. Just a quick reminder to everyone listening, every Wednesday evening, guys, 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, we do a live stream. We cover all the stuff that didn't fit into the podcast. It's a lot of fun. It's interactive. We get to do it with you guys. Also, don't forget, go review William's book on Amazon, The Book of Esports. It's a tremendous read. I'm sure any of you who've bought it and read it agree. And so go show William some love. And go pick up some Business of Esports merch because the goal is to make Business of Esports a lifestyle brand, business lifestyle. It's going to be a new thing. But as always, the podcast drops every Thursday, guys, and we will see you next week.